be connected. Voila. So recording in progress, and we're letting Tom start his wonderful talk for us. And it's in, let's see, what is it? It's May 31st, 2020, and it's the Big Art History group. And Tom is usually a member of the Tuesday class, and we are in the Middle Ages right now. And it became interesting for us to let Tom spend more time showing us his wonderful experiences in France for the Romanesque. So we hand it over to him and he shares, and this is it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'll try and keep this light. I've been warned that I'm not capable of that, but I know that this is a drinks affair, and Alex had, as she said, Ulla and I do.
Sorry, Tom, unmute yourself. I muted everybody else.
Okay.
Unmute, there you
hi,
go.
everybody.
You just muted everybody so that
Can you hear me properly?
Everybody good? We just, yes, very good.
All good.
All right.
Yes.
Perfect.
So, hi, everyone. So I'm going to try and accompany your drinks with showing you some pictures and talking a bit about our travels. Ulla and I do these trips, as Alex just said, and especially during the COVID times, it has been tough times for various reasons, but it's been a wonderful time to travel because everything's open and the restaurants are easy to get into, and you don't have anyone, you don't have the normal throngs of tourists blocking your way. So we do these pretty large trips. This is, you should be able to see my screen now and see the Google Maps. Can you see that?
Yes, we do. We see the map.
So this is a small portion of the trip that we did, where we traveled from Aix-en-Provence up to the top of Burgundy, and then went over to Colmar in the Alsace, and then we traveled through half of Switzerland, taking quite a lot of pictures on the way. And this is because we're doing in the class with Alex, we're doing Romanesque at the moment. Alex asked me to just show a few of the pictures from some of the churches and places we went into, and I'm going to focus very much on the Tympana and on the capitals. So here you see this short little stretch here. There's Avesnes, which is actually, and Charlieu, which are not in Burgundy itself, but just on the border down and then you go up through ANCY-LE-DUC, PARAY-LE-MONIAL, Berze-la-Ville, Cluny, Tournus. Here's Dijon. I'm not going to show that because I didn't really like the place that much. But through to the Artoun. This is on the edge of this Morvan, which is a big natural area, up to Vézelay and to Avalon. So a reasonably small area. If there's time, we'll also go down further south to have a look at Conques and look at Moissac. But I think probably the best is to start off by jumping in. Let's start up the top here in Vézelay and leap in there. So what I'm going to do is, if I manage this thing, is to change to my Lightroom. And can you now see Lightroom and the same screen that was as my background? Yes. You can see that. Great. So this is the Abbey of Vézelay. I don't know, have many of you been to see it? You should be able to use thumbs up for.
You can do the thumbs up, and I'm saying yes for me.
All right, so what I'm going to do is just show you a few pictures here that we've got. This is showing it from the. You can see it's on the top of the hill, and this is walking up to the church. You can see the front of the church there. It's quite an active monastery. These are the houses surrounding. This is the area in front of the church. This is looking from the steps of the church. It's utterly beautiful. Just a wonderful place. And there's Ulla walking along. She has the patience of Job. And so here you can see again that it's right on the top of the hill. Actually a good defensive position as well. So I'm going to be switching backwards and forwards between this thing is in my way. So here you're seeing, I'm using my Lightroom, so you see all the towns that we go to. So I'll be switching here and now going to the narthex of the church. Whoops, sorry. So this is the front part of the church, looking from the inside, looking out to the front, and we here you've got the church itself, the floor plan. The black area here, can you see my cursor around it?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so this black area is the actual nave of the church itself. You can see here's the choir. It has a bit of an irregular shape because of the previous buildings that it's built on top, and you have your crypt down here, so that has to be a part of the foundation, so it's a little bit wobbly around there. This originally was the front of the church, the west side, the Westvaart, but then a narthex was added. A narthex is an area for the unbaptized, and as things picked up, so the church itself was built around about 1100. Some of it was earlier, and then the narthex at 1120, 1130 was finished, but then St. Bernard of Clairvaux preached the Second Crusade from in front of the Westvaart here, standing here, and then they built, there was preaching the Second Crusade, there was a huge influx of pilgrims following that as well, and so they built this narthex to process the pilgrims that were coming through and get them baptized so they could then go into the church itself. And so if we look at the pictures here, so here's a picture of how the front of the church would have looked before they built the narthex. You've got the large tympanum, and then you got tympana on either side. This is very much derived from a Roman triumphal arch, the same structure. So if we then go into here, I don't know why this is just very slow. So here you can see, this is this big narthex that's been built. Previously there was only a little porch covering protecting the tympana, and then so we go from here to so if we look on the left hand tympana, so all these three, what they're doing is they are talking about that Jesus gave the apostles the command to go out and to preach to the world and to represent his word. And the Roman Catholic Church is built up on three pillars. It's the canon, the creed, and the clergy. And a lot of the iconography is around establishing those three different things. So the canon are the books of the New Testament and also the Old Testament. And the creed is the Trinity, mostly the Trinity. And the clergy are the people that have the say. And it's a lot of it's sort of establishing the legal right to tell people what to do, and saying this is what you have to do and this is what you have to believe. And so, you know, that in a nutshell is what all of these pictures are about. The ones on the left here, you can see Jesus with his apostles, and then on the right hand side, so here we have an angel holding, it's an Atlas angel holding up the side of that tympanum. Around his shoulder here, he's got an oliphant. An oliphant is a horn that was made out of an elephant's tusk, and you'll remember the Song of Roland, where they blow the oliphant. It was a thing that was used for gathering troops, for motivating troops in battle, for giving them signals and all of those things. So it's a very important part of, you know, God through the angels telling people what to do. And it's looking into the church. I'm going to be hopping in and out because I'm just using the pictures as they come. So here we have the second, no, sorry, that's the same one. We move across to the other tympanum on the right. So we've got the one on the left and the one on the right. This tympanum is showing various scenes from the life of the Virgin, of Mary. You can see here the three wise men, or the magi, giving her her gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh. Here you see the angel in the Annunciation scene, and here we have the crypt scene. So this is establishing the whole Marian story. And then the central, this is an absolutely magnificent tympanum and entrance area. So here you can see you have the standard thing. You have your, as Alex told us, the tympanum itself with the lintel below. This is very big, so they made of different stones. You have your archivolts above, and then you have the side pillars. You have the tremeau in the middle, which is supporting the lintel to make sure it doesn't fall down. So if we look at the actual picture itself, I'm not going to go into detail on this one because Alex did this in fair detail. So I want to show you a couple of additional things. So you have, is this showing up every time? Is there a lot of delay?
Perfect. It's perfect, Tom. Yep. All the turns are just fine in the pictures. Yep. Okay, so here you have so this is a very important sort of legal picture, in that this is Jesus, who's much bigger than everyone else. He's got his hands out. He's got his hands out, and he's so his hand, and from his hands, his blood is dropping on the apostles, and you can see the 6 apostles on either side. There are also rays going outwards, and there's a double meaning on this. On the one side, he's giving them the Pentecost, where they can speak tongues and go out and preach the word. But on the other hand, it's also him designating them as his representatives on earth, and that's a very important thing, because the Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church, has always preached that whatever the bishop says and the priest says is law, and that's because he got it through the original first bishop, which was Peter, who got it straight from Jesus. And this is a very, it doesn't matter if it's a good priest or a bad priest, you have to do what he says. And that's what Augustine said as well. And so you'll notice that these figures get larger the closer they get. They all have books in their hands. Here you can recognize St. Peter. They've got open books, which says, you know, you got to, we're accepting you in. These have closed books. In other words, if you don't believe properly, we're going to shut you out. So there's always a double message in this whole thing. There's a lot around the apocalypse generally. This is what is going to be the result if you don't do what we tell you to. You're going to burn in hell. And so there's a tremendous amount of meaning in these things. Above this here, you'll see this first arch. You've got the various people that the apostles are going to go and preach to. So both the actual, let me just go back one art again. So down on the lintel down here, you've got all the different types of people represented. Most of this comes from Pliny and from other classical sources. Around this arch here, this archivolt here, you've got the different people that are going to be preached to, and they sort of start at the top here, and then they go left, right, and then they go left, right there. So I'll show you a couple of those. Let's see. So you'll see I've put in descriptions here, trying to explain what the things are. So I hope I've sent you all these links. You're welcome to read it. I'm going to send everybody in the classes his whole lecture with all of these links afterwards as a huge resource for you all. Yes, it's all coming to you. So you'll get all my Lightroom albums and some of the Google Photos albums that are related to this subject. So here you can see I've sort of blanked it out so you can see them. On the left here, you've got
people writing on tablet. They were actually called lap desks. So these were the original laptops, which I thought was quite cute. On this side here, these two people, these are soldiers. Possibly I should go to a bigger one. So here we've got people that are going to be saved, and they all exclaiming and pointing in towards the Tramo. They're saying, I mean, to the Tympana, they're saying, look what's happening. Right at the top, these are people that can't speak on the right-hand side. Those are particular, there's a Greek name for them. One's holding his throat saying, I can't speak. Here we have, these are different ailments that people have. There's a hunchback. These people have got strange noses. I'm not too sure what that means. Probably something to do with smell. Here you've got the lame and the halt. These are the people that will be with different ailments that will be saved. There's another one with a person who's crazy, and others. Here you've got these people will be saved. This is a soldier who's grounding his spear, and others that are discussing what's going on. And so anyway, so that's the tympanum. I don't want to belabor that too much. I would say that what we should do from here is then go over to the nave and capitals. So I'll just move this out of here so you can see it bigger. Alex, is this fast enough? Is it? Am I going too?
You're doing fabulous. This everybody feel good? Everybody following along well? Yes, we're shaking our yes.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, Tom. It's fabulous.
Yeah, you can use these Vivians using the symbols, the various symbols if you want to.
Thumbs up, or you can unmute yourself and give a quick comment and mute yourself back, or everything's loose and free there.
So this is going into the church itself. So here again, we've got, I've just shown you this entrance. I've shown you these tympana here, and now we're going in to the church. It's being Gothicized, unfortunately, in especially the choir, and that's not our interest because we're going into Romanesque. So I can just sort of show you here. This is a view of the beautiful barrel, the ceiling with the groin vaults there. You'll see there's a whole lot of stuff. I want to get further down to here, where this is the crypt underneath this is the crypt down at the bottom, and what was kept in here are the remains of Mary Magdalene. So the whole thing about that the church got its power from was having the remains of Mary Magdalene. They filched those from another place called Maximin, and where they originally were. Mary Magdalene is a conflation person, so she did exist. She is a historical character, and she's specifically mentioned, but she's mentioned purely as she was the woman who had was exorcised 7 times to drive the devil out. She's mentioned in the same sentence as 3 other women. These were all consorts of Jesus that were as part of his group, his traveling band. And some of those women were rich. Mary Magdalene wasn't, but one of the things that's ascribed to her is that she's rich because other women were rich and mentioned in the same sentence. She's also mentioned as having been in revisiting the tomb after the crucifixion, and that so those are 2 historical events where she's mentioned. Beyond that, she's conflated with Mary of Bethany, which is Mary and Martha with Lazarus, and they all evidently came over in a boat together. And I can change to let me just go to a different screen here. And there's, so one of the other, you should be able to see, do you see all now?
Yes.
In the picture?
Yes.
So let me make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So they all came in a boat. Maximin was the boat's captain. Lazarus, so this boat had a lot of people in it. Lazarus and Martha and Mary, who are all brother and sister, except for Mary in this case is Mary Magdalene. There was, I think, also another one, Mary Clophas or someone, and they also had a slave girl. And I think that's quite cute because the slave, so they all landed their boat here at SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS, and there's a church there, and the slave girl, every year 5,000 gypsies descend here. She's the saint of the gypsies. And I've got the pictures, but possibly it'll be too much to jump there. So anyway, so Mary Magdalene wound up together with Lazarus's remains, wound up in Maximin. They moved him over. And so that was, you know, a powerful muti in those days. And that's why people liked to go there. So what we have here, though, is a plan of the columns. Oops.
Wait a minute, we're still at the map, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Jump back. My turn. Okay, so here we have the plan of the church, and you can see that there are columns, and some of the columns are 3 or 4 sided. Each one has a separate picture on it, and so there's quite a lot of them. There's about 70 or 80 of them. I don't plan to show every one, but there's quite a few that are interesting. So some of them are very high up. Unfortunately, the choir got pretty massacred when they did a Gothic renovation, so there's not much left there, and we couldn't get in either, so I couldn't photograph them. The people have sort of read all sorts of I have all sorts of theories about the iconographic program. The reality is it's fairly haphazard. It does represent a certain program because Peter the Venerable was abbot there for 20 years, from about 1100 to 1122, and he was one of the great scholars. Also became the abbot of Cluny, and he was responsible for translating the Quran from Arabic and various other Arabic works. So he did influence an iconographic program in that it expresses his thoughts, and there were certain parts of his doctrine. But the reality is that the people had to make these things, and then they stuck the columns up, and what was ready, and sometimes they did them really quick and stuck them up before they were finished. There's a sort of grouping of things, but it's not really as much of a program as people would like to believe. So here we have the first of our columns. You'll see there's a left side, and there's a middle and a right side. And so going back to the middle, this is an historiographic type of sculpture. So generally they're either histories, or they are from the Old Testament, or they're from the New Testament, or they are demonstrating some sort of abstract thought, like, you know, avarice and lust and things like that. So this one is historiographic. It's actually the education of Achilles. So here's Achilles. As you know, he had a goddess for a mother, and she gave him to a centaur. Here's the centaur teaching Achilles how to shoot this bird. So you'd think, wow, a classical Greek story in there. That's strange. This one, no one knows what it is. A bunch of guys sitting there. And so here we've got an interesting one. This is a teacher with his students, and you can imagine that the abbey was used for 2 purposes. So firstly, that initially it wasn't really so aimed at pilgrims. It was more aimed at the monks themselves, but then pilgrimages really took off in the 1100s. So there was a huge economic growth in Europe, especially in the more southern part of Europe in the 1000s and the 1100s, so the 11th and the 12th centuries. things were basically between 800 and 900. They were basically not that good. You had the Carolingian period around 800 going through about 880, which was very good for most of Europe. After the Carolingian period, during the whole Ottonian period, it was very much Europe sank into a bit of a hole economically. Then the whole thing got opened up with Venice to through to the Black Sea, and things got wealthier and wealthier. So people started being able to move, and then with the Crusades, there was even more reason why they started moving around and becoming very aware of their redemption and all those sort of things. And so you started getting a very, very big buildup of pilgrims in the 1100s. But so churches got adapted in order to handle them when they came. They weren't there every day. They were mostly there on major feast days. But even so, the glib sort of thing that all the academics say is, oh, they did this for the pilgrims. Oh, people couldn't read, so they had to have these pictures for the pilgrims. But that's not really the whole truth. Mostly this was for the monks. The abbeys were there for the monks that were there that had to then pray for the souls of the people that paid for it in the first place. And so here's one where with teaching, and monks had to learn. They were able to read and write, and so okay, bit of an excursion on that topic. So here we have one which is talking about the dangers of music, profane music. So here you see this guy is playing a horn. Here they're playing a stringed instrument, and there's a woman here pointing across at the others. And the devil on the right here, is grabbing this woman who's obviously incensed by the music. Her arms are in the shape of a vulva. You have the snake coming around here and biting him in his goolies. I mean, this is really showing the whole thing. You can see these devils always had these flaming hair. He's got a snake in his ear. I mean, they're giving this thing the full wind. It's very graphic. You must imagine this is really old. You know, this was made in 1120.
Exactly. For the whole group, you know, if you're thinking of Hieronymus Bosch at this point, that's 200 years later, yeah, or more. So this is the origins of all the fun of the, you know, wild demons that we come to love later on. But what an exciting opportunity also, or for the artists to make such a devil getting up to such mischief. Wow.
It's fantastic. And they always do a lot with vegetation as well. You can see a lot of different flowers and things that they always have in it. The interesting thing is, this is a relatively small space, and yet they're able to pack a lot in without it getting crowded. So here we have, let's go to this one. This is not a particularly interesting. I don't want to do every single one. So here, this is the 4 rivers of paradise. You can see here the river, one's dumping it out of a bucket, one's dumping it out of a horn, one's puking it out, another one's pouring it out of a bowl. These are the 4 rivers of paradise that came from paradise, and they went out to the 4 corners of the earth, and you know, you can read all about that in Genesis. But a very important part of this is establishing the veracity of the Genesis story. Here we just got some wild beast type. There's a lot around the fighting of the demons, because you know, a lot of this was all very apocalyptic that they preached. The end of the world's coming. If you don't save your soul, you're going to fry in hell forever. And the apocalyptic story goes back. So the revelation of John is based largely on Enoch and other earlier apocalyptic stories. In fact, the revelation of John pinches large sections and quotes verbatim practically from Enoch. And there it's all about the battle of the, because there were these watchers, and the watchers slept with the human women, and then you had the Nephilim, the giants, and then they got out of hand, and the angels came and fought with them, and there were all these wild demons. This is all represented here. It's fantastic stuff, and it's great. I highly recommend you read Enoch and those others. I mean, Revelations shouldn't have been in the Bible, and I think Luther actually excluded it, or wanted to exclude it, and he stuck it in the back bit when he was, basically convinced he wasn't allowed to leave it out altogether. But Revelation has got absolutely zilch to do with Christianity, and it's based on these older apocalyptic tales. It was only kept in by Athanasius. You remember 325, you had the Council of Nicaea, and Athanasius was about 18 at the time. He was brilliantly clever, and he came from Alexandria. He basically wrote the text for the senior Roman clergy to talk from at that Nicene council, and he was fighting against. They were fighting against the Arians. So the Trinitarians against the Arians, and he brought in Revelations because of the beast. He needed the beast so that he could say the Arians are the beasts, and he used that to basically get them all killed and chucked out. So, which is a good start for a religion. Anyway, so that's a bit on the beasts there. So here we have this. This is another historical theme. This is the abduction of Ganymede. If you remember Zeus, he used to take a liking to somebody and then appear in a cloud or in a whatever, and then have his way with them. Well, this was a young boy that he took a liking to. He turned himself into an eagle, and
isn't it interesting, Tom, how also you really have a feeling that these monks have been reading their mythology?
Anyway, it's quite a dramatic scene, actually. And again, a non-Christian. So really, what you're looking at is that the abbeys had very large scriptoria, and Berze-la-Ville had a very good scriptoria as well. And this is where the monks sat here with their laptops, their lap desks, copying out the texts, and they also were copying classical texts, so the texts were known to them, and these influenced as well. Possibly at this stage I could just pop over to something else. So if I look down here, so this is the Beatus book. There'll be one of the texts that they copied. This is got some beautiful illustrations. This book was actually done in, I think, 793, so time of Charlemagne. And they very much would have copied. They knew all of these pictures, and most of the pictures that you'll see on the sculptures actually are coming out of these books. There were also a lot of silk rugs that they had. They had silk, mostly they were Arabic manufacture. So they got a lot of their iconography and their ideas from the Arab, from the silk carpets and things, from the books, and so and here you see snakes. And here you see a devil, one of the bad angels fighting with a good angel. There's an Oliphant again. So this is a recurring theme, one of snakes and birds fighting. It's about evil. And here you see at the bottom right here, this is one of the pages. Here you see this person lying down, and you see that this is from the La Guernica in Barcelona. I mean, we're in Madrid now. And this is Picasso's, and he's quite clearly taken this figure directly from there. So, 1,000 years later, people are still copying these things. Here's Matisse, here's Dance, and these figures. also very much taken from there. So there's no harm in taking old. I think where was I? I was in the nave and the capitol, so the basilica. So we'll just zip back to where we were before. So we just saw Ganymede, didn't we? So there's Ganymede. Teachers and students. You know, we're those two teachers and students. That was what made us say that. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Okay, no, we've seen that. We've got the rivers. Sorry. Okay, that was it. We're at the demons. That's right. And now, so what's the next one? Okay, yeah, that was Ganymede. Yeah, this is Judas. Judas has hung himself from a tree. Of course, this is not in the Bible itself. It's not in. You won't find it in the Gospels. But there are all these apocrypha. There are also pseudepigrapha, which are books that have been written that didn't make it into the accepted canon. Likewise, there are apocrypha, which were books that were written at the time, like the Gospel of Peter or the Gospel of Judas, which is a very popular one, or all these other things that were written. There were various other apocalypses, like the Apocalypse of Peter was actually more popular than the John. And so the people, they read these other books. So although the canon itself was the one that is fixed, until the Reformation, until the actual Council of the Council of Trent in 1560 odd, when the Counter-Reformation was launched, that was the time when the Catholic Church actually decided what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. Prior to that, you had the canon, which is that which was in the book, but there was pretty much a free-for-all of all sorts of books that were used and beliefs that were held. For example, astrology was extremely important. The popes, even in the Renaissance times, had their own personal astrologers and wouldn't do anything unless they were told that. That stuff all went out with all these darn Germans being so critical in the Reformation period, and that sort of screwed things up. But here you got Judas. He went out and he committed suicide. Here you see someone carrying his body away. These are the bases of the capitals. This is just a scene of soldiers fighting. No one really knows what it is. If we get to see Conch, there's there was a lot of lawlessness, especially in the 11th century, and the monasteries did quite a lot in terms of getting people to sign treaties so the knights wouldn't just go around killing everyone and marauding. They had a big problem with too many guns in those days, which we obviously don't have today. Here we have a scene of so this is one of these abstract ones. The guy on the left here is despair. He's thrusting a sword into himself, and then on the right is lechery and lust, and she's pulling at her breast. She's got a snake going up between, it's going to bite her. And so again, writings of St. Augustine, where he said that lust leads to despair, which I guess all married people can attest to. So
don't you think it's amazing, Tom? Just one quick statement here. Look at that devil. I mean, you really could say, what were those, the freedom that these sculptors had working with the monks, thinking about what they wanted to present, given some cues, okay, what it is you might make. But at the same time, it was really the closest thing to, I don't know, sci-fi special effects.
It's also based to a degree on, sorry.
Yeah, it's sort of our modern entertainment idea of fear and excitement. When they were in church and they looked up at these capitals, they were really getting some pretty exciting material. I mean, look at that guy with his flowing hair and his tongue hanging out, right?
And so it's based to a degree on classical examples. So yeah, this has a little tail. They're very much based on the faun. They use the faun quite frequently. So there's a repetition of themes. But there's beautiful facial expressions, as you say. The other thing is this would have been painted, and so it would have been much more gaudy and garish, and I think that would have drawn attention to a lot of the features. The other thing is that they would have writing up the top here. There would have, sorry, it would have been painted. So let me go back there. So they painted instructions and told them what was going on, and that's all been lost. So there's a lot of meaning here that would have been told.
It would have been great. It would have been great entertainment for both the monks and the pilgrims, though. Or can you?
Yeah, and I think this one was very much aimed at monks, because they had to be celibate, and that wasn't that easy always. And so this is really saying you better stay celibate. I guess it also was for the pilgrims, but as I was saying, mostly this is for the monks that are coming in there on a day-by-day basis, and really telling them. You can see here the mason's mark. I think this is wonderful. I mean, it's so expressive. There's so much. You look at the shapes of the foliage and the way that they're contributing to the whole motion of the thing. It's incredible.
Oh, Tom, wait a minute. I need to say something about that. That little figure on the right is a woman, and it looks to me like she's pulling on her breast, which is empty. And then there's a snake biting her genitals. When you think of the misogyny and you're a woman looking up at that, I mean, it's incredible.
It's true. It's also this, these are allegories, of course, too, of the idea of somehow summing up this negative side of sex. But it's also really the post, these are bodies that have already breastfed. They are bodies that, the breasts are used. This is the, kind of like warning you of your midlife crisis, by the way. Yeah.
Right. Also, it's 1,000 years ago. And so we shouldn't view things with today's glasses. That's and the other thing is it's a portrayal of a woman, because the Latin words for all of these abstract concepts have a feminine ending. And so they portray them as feminine. And that's not necessarily meaning it in a misogynistic way. I think it's just, because it was Prudentia and whoever else, and whether it's the vices or the virtues. All right. So good contribution. Thank you. So here we have the killing. I think this is the killing of the death of Ammon. Oh yeah. So son of David getting killed. There's all sorts of stories around there. This. So this one is known as St. Eustace, but in Germany it's St. Hubertus. You have the Roman general who sees a stag which has a cross on its head here. It's a pretty bad picture, sometimes quite dark. So he's got a cross on his head, he's converted, and eventually gets martyred. And so this is that story there. Here we've got Noah building the ark. I think it's quite nice. So you can see him chopping the wood, and it's actually a wickerwork art. And you've got the other guy who's helping him, probably one of his sons. This is a continuously recurring theme, the ark. Here we have Daniel in the lion's den, getting some close attention from the lion. I think it's quite a funny looking lion.
They have a wonderful way with animals, don't they? They just have such a sensitive, fun way with animals. Look at that.
Yeah,
line, giving him a
and they're
hug.
also very, very liberal with the way that they suggest a scene as well, which is quite fun. I mean, the stuff is light-hearted sometimes.
Very lighthearted, and I mean, you wouldn't say cartoon-like,
Yeah.
but in the way cartoons give us a joy, these must have also given joy, this storytelling, or?
The thing is that at Berze-la-Ville we had various sculptors. Gilbertus, who came from Autun, was there. There were others working there, and they also reused some older sculptures. So there's a substantial difference in the style between the various ones. When we get to Autun, you'll see that it's all been done by one guy. It's all very similar. I mean, similar in style. Here they jump around quite a bit, and yeah, so this is the mystic mill. You can see at the top, you can see this is the Old Testament stuffing the Old Testament into the top mill, and it comes out at the bottom. And this is St. Paul. He's always shown as bald or semi-bald. They didn't really worry about facial hair. They sometimes give him a moustache or a beard or something like that. Or be clean shaven, but you could tell from the tonsure or from the hairstyle who it was. And so anyway, the New Testament is coming out of the Old Testament. This is obviously extremely important, especially in Roman times. It's, I think, the reason why Matthew stuck in so much from the Old Testament into his version of what Mark had written before, because it was necessary to establish the antecedents, to establish the ancient antecedents in order for it to qualify as a true Roman religion. You couldn't have a newly created Roman religion. It had to have ancient antecedents. And Matthew did a solid job of finding those. That's why you'll see everywhere, you'll see Jeremiah, Isaiah, Daniel, and those that are associated with them, because those are the ones that predicted the coming of the Messiah. And so they were very important for the legal, for putting a legal stamp on the Christian religion and getting it accepted. So here we have the story of Dives. So Dives, this is the rich man. So the story is that there was a rich man called Dives, and sitting outside there was this poor guy called Lazarus. And Lazarus was also, in some versions, a leper. So here you can see he's dying, and his soul is being grabbed straight away by the devils. And he's got his mouth open. He's about to give him a chomp. Here you've got snakes. Here is pots of money underneath the bed. It's a beautiful bed too, though, if you look at the way that it's been built and everything. He also had two ladies that were his companions, and they don't look like they're particularly concerned about him. So this is, it's not going well for him. On the left here, you have the soul of Lazarus, the poor Lazarus, going up to heaven, being carried by two angels. I'm not too sure what is on the right. I'm not too sure what. Oh, then there's someone on the right teaching it. So
isn't that so interesting, Tom, back there? In other words, that almond-shaped mandorla,
yes,
that the good man is in, is like a little pod of holiness. Yeah. So he's got, the poor leper gets to go to heaven, and the ladies don't even notice that their rich husband there, or whoever he is, he's going, that the demons have got his soul. How marvelous, right? And that's really absolutely the bottom line of what every medieval person worried about, right? Whether they were going to be going to hell or going to be going to heaven. And perfect way to show it, or?
Absolutely, and it keeps the monks focused as well. It's good for the pilgrims and good for the people that want to donate money.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a huge similarity between Disney and the way Disney's run and the way the Catholic Church was run back then. The same thing. You had a very strong iconography. You had a very strong belief system. The people had to really adhere to it, and they were very good at making money. Otherwise, there are obviously great differences. I don't want to be whatever. But anyway, so here, this is actually the one that goes before this. This is the Feast of Dives. So this is important to know this one in order to know the other one. You probably all know this story anyway. But so here you see Lazarus, who's, he's obviously crippled and can't walk properly. The dogs are biting him. He's standing outside the door, and there he is. And here you have dives, and dives is just the Latin word for rich man. It wasn't his real name. And he's feeding the one lady. These are the two ladies you saw later. He's feeding the one with his some food. Here you see the food on the table. She's holding a knife in her hand. I mean, it's cool stuff. And you got some lions barking away on the right there. And then here you've got a servant. Actually, I think I'm still too big. Sorry, I'm having a bit of difficulty with this sizing thing. Come on.
So of course, to anybody who was a poor person or had had a tough life, if they would have looked at this capital, they would have been imagining that their recompense would really be in heaven, and that the rich, the Elon Musks and the rest, would be in trouble in the end, right?
Exactly,
A wonderfully clear example of pain and suffering in this life doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to go to heaven, right? It's the opposite. And that's,
and again, it's the seven vices, avarice, gluttony, lust, etc., are being demonstrated. Here you can see the servant here's a fire, and he's got a pot on the fire, and here he's holding another pot. The interesting thing about Lazarus, talking about conflation. So I mean, this is what they did in the first 5 or 6 or up the first 1,000 years, is produce all these stories, which especially the gospel were very bleak and very short on explaining things, and so they made all these things up. And Lazarus is another one that got conflated. So you've got Lazarus, the man that was brought back to life by Jesus from Lazarus of Bethany, and this is Lazarus the beggar. So Lazarus gets mentioned twice in the gospel, so put them together. Lazarus also was rumored to be a leper. This was also something they found later. So Lazarus, that was raised from the dead, was able to cure lepers. This is also a big draw card for the pilgrimage. So there were a lot of lepers were turning up and trying to get healed. And it was a big problem in those days. The plague still was a couple of 100 years out, the really bad bits. And so I just find very interesting that figures that get conflated.
He's also so wonderfully represented as a body really wasted away with a crutch, and the dogs licking his sores, And when you think that there was no medicine to deal with this kind of suffering back then, that the church was their hope for healing, it's really poignant, actually, the whole thing. I mean, it really.
You had the order of Saint-Lazare, which were knights in Jerusalem that were dedicated to healing lepers, and it was a big thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't really. The problem was that the Arabs had really good medicine, but the Christian world was still incredibly backward in those days.
Yeah. By the way, the thing you're showing now there that is extremely bizarre and erotic, that rich man feeding her into her mouth that way. What a detail.
They're very graphic in what they show. They don't hold back.
No. And this has nothing to do with the old Roman world, by the way. When we say Romanesque, that's a title we give to this art, right? From the 19th century backwards. But, there's a particular kind of storytelling here that's really innovation. And that gesture, very obvious, where he's putting food in that woman's mouth and her eyes are turning to her, husband or whatever, is so creepy. What the woman selling out for the money. You can see your oligarch right there with his, you know, toy wife. Totally, or it's unbelievable. And it obviously means that all the way back in history, there were exactly these women who sold out for the money. And that's what it looks like to me there. Wow, incredible.
And but there are, as in all of these, there are many levels to it, and there are many many lessons that get drawn from it. You know, there's the gluttony, there's the avarice, the pursuit of money, there's the lust, there are all of these different aspects, and they managed to pack it all into a tiny little space.
Stunning.
So let's keep going. So here we have the basilisk. Here's a basilisk. A basilisk is this multi creature with a head of a body of a fish and a head of an ox and a this and that. It can all, quite often it'll be a cock. The cockerel was also bad, and this is just sort of evil. Mostly it's the good against evil, the battle of good against evil. These are two monks. I think, what are they called? Basil and Anthony. I think the two original monks, the one the sort of the Eastern monasticism, and the other was the Western. Yeah, it says it at the top here. That makes it easy. Yes. No one actually survived, and they're sharing bread. They shared bread in the desert. You can see it's been split in half. But there are a couple of good ones coming up. This is fantastic. So here you've got you can guess what this is. This is Adam and Eve. And Eve is offering Adam the apple, which in this case is actually a pomegranate. You'll see in the narthex it's a bunch of grapes. They didn't really, and I think in the ancient texts it's actually written as a fig. So the apple is a fairly recent thing. So here, this is a fairly sort of petite looking
Eve.
Eve offering him the pomegranate, and he's hitting himself on the chest. I'll come back to that just now. So here you see this incredible tree. It's just the most beautiful tree with a snake sliding, entwined in the tree itself. And then you go on, and here they are. Suddenly they realize they're naked, and God comes and says, "What's going on?" And they're sort of hiding away there, and which I think is just beautifully done, absolutely beautiful. This one also is interesting in that you see this gesture that he's making. He's hitting himself on the chest. So most of these monks, most of their lives, they were silent. They weren't allowed to talk. You did have at meals and at times you'd have people reading texts, but there'd be one person reading from these different books, both the canons and also the Apocrypha. And so they communicated very much using hand signals. And there are actually books which you can read if you want to, which describe these different hand signals. And that's very important because they needed to communicate with each other, but they weren't allowed to speak. And there was very much in the Cluniac order. So we haven't really talked about the Cluniac order, but Cluny, so there's the Abbey of Cluny, which is reasonably close to Berze-la-Ville. And we're not going to have time to look at it today. But the Abbey of Cluny built up, I think they had 1,450 monasteries at zenith. It was slightly later than now, around about 1,200, 1,250. This was an empire run by the Abbey of Cluny. Had absolute say. He was responsible for choosing all of the bishops and the priors and everybody of all the monasteries. They all had to feed their money up to the top, and it would be set up that he only reported directly to the Pope. And so he was very, very powerful. In fact, he was more powerful at one stage than the Pope himself. And within this Cluniac order, they had their way of talking with hand signals. And here, in this case, it's very context sensitive as well. In this case, he's saying, "I know what I have done." In other cases, doing this means something else. And a very large part of these statues, if you go through and look at them quite often, which I do, you'll see that there are various hand signals. So a lot of the times when you think it's strange that a hand's doing something, it's actually because he's using sign language.
Don't you
So that's worth looking at.
Tom, don't you think it's also thank you very much? It looks to me also there like a, well, thank you, dear, for handing me this wonderful keys to the kingdom of everything. He's accepting the gift. She's making,
absolutely.
right?
There's double meanings everywhere. So yeah, they're very much into prefigured.
It's very sweet the way he bends forward and accepts her gift, right? And she's so open. She looks younger, she looks sexier, and he is being taken and accepts the gift, right? Wow.
You could see her as one of these California dolls, you know, sort of like she's you can imagine how she's
just perfect. Right?
So just as in the tympanum, you have those two levels of meaning. So likewise here, you have two levels of meaning. You're saying thank you, but at the same time, they're always into this prefiguration business. You know, Daniel prefigured such and such, or foreshadowing, or whatever you want to call it. And so once again, he's saying, I know that I'm doing wrong, but I'm still going to do it, right? And I think that's meant to encourage the onlooker to think about that, to think about the one and the other, which makes these things so fascinating.
And also everybody has had their moment of sin where they have made a mistake. And these two people, for the ultimate mistake at the beginning of time of mistakes, I think it also sort of welcomes a kind of an understanding that we're human. They're very interesting humans, these two.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a common or garden mistake. I mean,
yeah,
because of this, all of us have original sin.
Yeah.
And because of original sin, Jesus had to die on the cross. So, I mean, he's just made one big whopping mistake.
It's a big whopping mistake, but I would say, considering those devils, this is a pretty gentle version of mistake. You know, I keep feeling
there's
what you're showing here.
People.
Yeah, there's a kind of a pathos indeed, and there's a kind of a sensitivity to the human condition in all of this. That means that these monks, when they're absolutely chopping and carving away for months and months and months, these capitals, right? You can feel them really trying to get in empathetically into our problem. And that is an amazing thing, actually, right?
But beautiful art too. I mean, you can just appreciate it for the art. I love the vegetation. You just look at the vegetation in detail. Anyway, let's press on. Okay, so that I jumped to the end there. I mean, what do you want me to do now? There's so much more to see here. There's a lot of beard pulling. So this is something that goes on all the time. Beards being pulled. This is the temptation of St. Anthony, and the devils are pulling the beards. You see the devils have got their little tails.
Do you remember? So for Anthony, remember, he's the beginning of monasticism in the desert. And he's the guy who goes off to the desert and lives alone. And it's the beginning of monasticism. And the problem of what those monks and their temptations felt like when they took themselves away from distractions and they were really dealing with their spiritual lives. I mean, this is temptation, or?
Well, so this is the second temptation of Anthony, where they take him up and stick him on a tower. I mean, it's really meant to be showing the power of that they need to resist temptation, and that it's not easy, and that some others have gone before them that managed to do it, so they better do it too. You'll notice the striations here on the devils. You can see it here, almost like the tendons. It's almost as they've been flayed alive, and that's a very common feature of the devils, is that they've been flayed. They've always got this flame hair. So we're at 12:10. So I can show you more of these. or we can jump to a different one, like say Artun, or we can.
Tom,
What would you like?
I would compare, because you had such a good foundation. So imagine, again, you're walking around the nave and you're looking up at these capitals and you're having all this entertainment. You know, Kit, for instance, in our class is a screenwriter of important movies and things. So you get the idea of screenwriting here, or storytelling, or it's incredibly powerful how much story is going on in one church. Yeah.
Well, you know, that you say that there's a large body of, you know, I've done a lot of research trying to find images, trying to identify these things. And the Disney, getting back to Disney again, Disney has a very large stock that they have made public of all of these pictures. Yeah. And I think Disney used these images in order to do their cartoon movies.
Yep. They absolutely, we had an exhibition here in Munich some years ago that also linked it back to the European tradition of storytelling in the Romantic. Disney is based on earlier art, no question. Yeah, but the cartoon-like quality and the very expressive, clear storytelling here is what they wanted in their cartoons. Absolutely. But maybe I would say in the last half hour, maybe it would be nice if you compared to one more church. And then I know
okay, we'll do.
Yeah, I think maybe Autun might be an interesting comparison, or something else.
Okay, let's jump to Autun. We'll jump to Autun. So this is the, just I wanted to show you this. This is probably a capital that got reused from an earlier version of the church, because the previous one had been built in the 800s. And this is a much more ancient rendering. So you can see how artistic styles changed over time. But let's go to Autun. So Autun here, I'll just show you general here. So Autun was a Roman town, and it was called Augusta Dunum, founded around about 450 or something, 445 BC, in the time, no, it must be later than that, about 20 BC, in the time of Augustus, so that's where the name comes from. And it was a decent sized town. It had about 30,000 people back then. And this is the gate. One of the two of the gates remain. So if you remember this shape, that would be of interest. I could show you more there, but there's a very large amphitheater there, seated 17,000 people, which is pretty darn big. And actually theater that was, not an amphitheater. So if we go here to the Cathedral of Saint-Lazare, and well, let me start off with the tympanum and the outside. So here, this is the church. It was built as a Romanesque church, but then it got Gothicized. And here you can see this tower is still Romanesque, although I think that got rebuilt in the 19th century to fix it up. Here you can see it from the side. So the interesting thing is the axis of this church, and I'm going to just go into that briefly. So here you've got the church plan. This is the old Gothic church. It had the main nave and the two side aisles. It had a big door here on this side, and here you've got the big tympanum at the bottom. This is called, you'll notice this faces north. So this is actually the north tympanum. And this is actually east, and this is west. Normally, as you know, the east is here where Christ was risen, so that's where the choir is, and the west is usually down the bottom, because that's where the Germans put their battlements in the Westfront. So let's have a look at why that is. I think it's quite fascinating. So here you got the church. You can see this is all this stuff here in the front, this bit here. This is all Gothic. They stuck all these, a couple of hundred years later, they stuck these big chapels on the side there because people used to spend lots of money fixing those chapels up, and it was a good idea. So this is this left-hand door. So this church is dedicated to Saint Lazare, so Lazarus. And as I told you, there were two Lazaruses. They got jammed together into one, came over on the boat. We're in Maximin, where the captain was, and they filched this thing at about 850, 879, something around there. They grabbed those bones and got them for themselves. And let me see it. I just need to find this thing. Here. So here we are.
Just Saint Lazarus is the guy who rose from the dead back in Jerusalem. So when you think the guy who was brought alive by Jesus, the idea that he kept on living, had a life, and became a saint, and his bones, like Mary Magdalene's, make it all the way to the center of France, that was pilgrimage gold. Right? That's
and they made that stuff up. It all got made up in the time of Charles the Great.
But it's fun.
Charles the Great started the whole thing. Really, he brought these relics from, once he conquered Italy, he brought them up into the north, and it went crazy. You know, there was a big thing. So here you'll see, just to see, there's Tel Aviv, there's Jerusalem. This is so here's Jerusalem down here. There's the tomb of Lazarus, that's Bethany, and here's Jerusalem. It's only 2 kilometers away, a mile and a half. So it's very, very close. And what happened was, when Jesus went, this happened in the week before Jesus was crucified. And so he basically, they said to him, Mary and Martha said, hey, come over here, Lazarus is sick. And he said, no, give me a couple of days. And then when he got there, they were all angry with him because Lazarus had died, and he said, don't worry, and he resurrected him. And the resurrection of Lazarus was a prefiguration of Jesus's resurrection. That's why it's so important. It's, again, all about prefiguration. So,
and by the way, still today in Jerusalem at Easter, all of the Thursday processions, the Palm Sunday processions, start at the house of Lazarus and come down into Jerusalem. They all remember that location of his friends. And Lazarus was an incredibly important saint for people, because it's really, you and I can be resurrected, not just Jesus.
And it got conflated with the leper, the cure of leper. So this is the old church here. So this church was built, I think, in about 390 or something like that. So a hell of a long time. Then it got burnt down, fell down in about 600 odd, and they built a new one. So this thing, and it got fixed up in Charlemagne's day. So it was 600 building that were fixed up in the 800s. This was the cathedral. And you had Lazarus's, so they had various bits of Lazarus. They had the body, they had an arm, they had a head. Unfortunately, Avalon also had a head. And then they had full heads, and they lived parallel for a couple of 100 years until Pope said to Avalon that they got to stop. But so they had various places, and the monks used to go around to these different places. Well, so what happened was, you had the first crusade in about 1090, and the guys went to Jerusalem, and they got there and they saw this a temple of Bethany. So what they decided was they were going to move, they were going to build a place specially for Lazarus, for all of his remains, take it out of this cathedral and move it over here, because it gave the pilgrimage traffic was starting to pick up, and they needed a bigger place for it. And also, this place was a very old building, and so they built this across here. So this is on an east-west axis, as you can see. Here's your east side here, and the west entrance there. So what had happened is they built this thing here, and the monks would go across on their stomachs from the one church into the other, and then crawl around from one place to the other. So that was one of the things. So this is actually the east portal of the building, but it's called the north portal because this is always called the Westwerk. So it's very confusing when you read about it. What they also did is they built an exact replica of the church in Bethany that they saw. So let's get rid of this on. Seems otherwise it doesn't work. Let me just find there. Here, where is it? Somewhere I've got the thing of there. Oh, that's elsewhere. So I'll show you just now the actual Bethany. I'll show you the actual Church of Bethany itself that they rebuilt right here in the choir, and they took all of these bones that they had scattered around in the old church and they stuck them into one place, and they built this church so that they could worship Lazare. And the church was given by a guy called Hugh of Burgundy, who also happened to be, I think, the brother or very closely related to the Pope at the time. And this place was really built so that the monks could pray for his soul and for all the other people that were part of his community or his family and everything else. It later became a big pilgrimage thing, but initially it was really for that purpose. It doesn't have any clear iconographic program. The sculptors were more or less allowed to do their thing, although so it's not very theological, I would like. So the other one that we just saw was moderately theological in Berze-la-Ville. If you go down to Moissac, which was also Cluniac, but dependence, it was the Bishop of Toulouse that did Saint-Saëns that you spoke about last time, Alex, and then he went across to Moissac. He was appointed abbot there as well, and there is a very strong theological program. So here it's weaker. So if we go and have a look at the nave, I'm not going to look at the tympanum because you did that last time. But so here we got the church. We've got various columns. It's not that many. It's not so big. Here's where they blasted out these areas here, and then they put the Gothic walls here, and you've got all the chapels there. So I think you can actually see them here. Here you can see this Gothic aisle, and then well, I've got a chapel, so somewhere you'll see them on the sides. So here, let's just look at this. This is interesting. So do you recognize this? Remember the picture I showed you of the Roman gate?
Yes.
This is an exact copy of it, an absolute exact copy. So in there they put this. This is the exact model of how the church that looked like in Bethany. So basically, these knights went out there, the Crusaders went there, saw it, said, we got to build one of these and put a church around it. And that's what they did. And it was all made of marble. It was beautiful. Now, most of these things you've been looking at have been damaged, both in the War of Religion, which was around about 1560, that ended with, remember, with the St. Bartholomew Day massacre and sort of general exodus of all Huguenots. And then again in 1789 and following, when the French Revolution, that hated the church and the structures of the church and everything so much that they had everything smashed. Anything that was religious was smashed. If it wasn't religious, like king or something, that was okay. Generally, they left it alone, but not always. And most of these places, like Cluny, were then designated as Steinwerke, which were quarries, and they were dismantled stone by stone. But in this particular case, the monks did it themselves. The abbey in about 1760 decided that it wasn't modern enough, and they did a couple of things. They actually dismantled this completely and sold off the marble, and they also covered up the tympanum with plaster and broke off the one head that was sticking out because they said it wasn't modern enough. And that was lucky because the tympanum survived, and now we see the tympanum as a whole. So if we just go back again to the outside, having done that little excursion, and we look at this thing here, this is the door. So this is so I showed you that this is the true east entrance. And this is the entrance that they really entered through. This tympanum, it's very fancy, the Day of Judgment. There was a cemetery down here. This was the old Roman wall running here. There was a cemetery here. So it's facing the cemetery. It was a reason why you'd have the Day of Judgment there. But this was actually the main entrance on this side. And this told the story of Lazarus. So here you see it. This is still original. This is exactly how it was. The doors changed. But here again, you can see at the top here, the exact copy of the Roman, the Roman gate that they did. And so there's the top part and here the bottom part. So this, you would imagine, here was the lintel in stone. Here was a tympanum, which gave the story of Lazarus. This was the actual, the resurrection of Lazarus here in stone. The lintel showed Adam and Eve. And then there was a tremeau, a stone tremeau in the middle. There's been a reconstruction. Oh, here we got it. So here, there's only a few fragments left, unfortunately. A marvelous Eve and some other pieces up here. So this is the statue on the left there. You can see when they walk in, this is a common thing that they do. Devils tempting you, saints resisting temptation, telling people that walk in, you better do the same thing or else. And this is the most marvelous thing. I think, Alex, you showed this last time. This is Eve. And what she's doing, you can imagine this here. Remember, there's Adam. He's lying this way. Here's Eve. So they got their heads together. And you got Satan behind here, egging her on. And look at her. She's whispering. She's got her hand here. She's whispering to him and saying, "Oi, you want an apple?" And there's an apple, right? This time we have real apples, not grapes or pomegranates or figs or anything like that. And you just look at her body, how incredible it is. Well, you know, these things come. I mean, if you go to the
also, by the way, this fruit idea and the seduction of the sex and the seduction of the fruit. You know, we take fruit for granted, but the idea that you could be whispering and looking sexy and pulling fruit of an exotic kind off of a tree and wonderful, just really enticing, right? And so when they're coming to the front of their church, they're also kind of always wrestling there with the temptations of their flesh, which is the truth of the matter, isn't it? Whether you're a monk or you're another person. Yeah. How religious?
So the people might have come through the judgment portal and seen, you know, the judgment, and the monks probably came through the side here and probably saw more about the dangers of the temptations. This one I'm showing you here is just here's from the museum, the Museum Roland, which is right next door, and you'll see that they're taking very much a classical
yes.
Example here where they learned from.
Yes, yes.
There are a couple of other things here. I mean, it's beautiful. You look at the detail. It's spectacular. Unfortunately, a little bit damaged. And here you see the devil's claw. So remember, the devil is to the right, and so here's his claw. So he must have been. Who knows? I wish I could have seen that. If you look at the further things, so as I said to you, there are a couple of. So they found a few pieces in houses. This piece they found, this piece they found, this piece they found, and so here you see, this was. So what happened is people stuck them in their houses, and then in the 1800s they were collecting them again. Here you see St. Martin dividing his coat. St. Martin's a big figure in that area. He also was in Autun, actually was deliberate, was definitely there. And if you remember, he has his sword and he's cutting his coat. This is the tympanum that's showing the Lazarus story. This was some sort of cure that I don't know what it is. And this one, this is interesting. Can anyone guess where this is? Where this is kept? Anyone from New York? It's in the cloisters.
Ah, yes.
So this is actually an angel, and here it is. This is from the cloisters thing, but they kept it. They're not giving it back, and But it's interesting that there are only very few fragments left, unfortunately. But I think that's the most wonderful tympanum. And you can see that it's part of the cult, you know, the cult of Lazarus, and the building is there for the worship of Lazarus, and for especially, I think that they I'm not sure it was this particular church. There were monks singing and praying for the souls of the people, of the sponsors, all time, 24 hours a day, without cease. And they also were, and this was all a legal thing, there were legal documents. What happened is the monastery would be given lands, and the lands would only be there provided they kept up their part of the bargain, which is they had to do a certain amount of praying for the souls, and they had to go from column to column and do things. And it specified also what would happen to them if they didn't do it. And these things were fought in court as well. Obviously, some of the relatives who didn't benefit weren't that excited about it happening. So I mean, back to here. It was
a kind of a business, actually, transaction, wasn't it? That you gave beautiful churches, and that you expected then the monks who were living off your money to be really praying for humanity, but definitely for you too. And
it was very much actually for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
and it is not just a Christian thing. I know in the Jewish religion as well.
Yeah.
That,
I know
a great-great-grandfather of mine.
Yeah, it goes down into today too. You know, when my mother.
But it was time limited. There were different sorts. So you had time limited ones.
Yeah.
You had unlimited, so in perpetuum. Some of it was only while he was alive. Some of it was in perpetuum. You also had your military ones where they would get lands, but then they'd have to provide a certain number of soldiers. I mean, it was, as you say, all very much a legal thing. One of the other things is there were altars scattered all around these churches. Between most of the columns, there were altars. So you'll read, because this is before the chapels were placed on the sides that you can see in there. And so these altars would be used for, you know, praying for certain things. And then they'd have the columns and the sculptures above. We've seen it in other churches where they had baldachins that were squeezed between the columns, and then you have I think that was up in Rouen in Normandy, we saw that. And they'd have an altar there, and there'd be
so all these different altars,
places.
All these different altars could actually have priests doing different services at the same time if they had to. And they
absolutely
and they could be like meeting the needs of those prayers. The pilgrims could be wandering through, and there could be multiple moments of the day in different parts of the church. This was a giant, like, religious factory in a way.
Absolutely. So now we're in Autun, in the Church of St. Lazare, which became the cathedral, and they pulled the other one down. So the entire iconographic program is done by one guy, and that's this Gilbertus. If I go back to the tympanum, and you go to the tympanum here, so we've got all the pictures. You can go crazy watching this stuff if you're on your own later. And there's on the tympanum, it says, let me take it on the bigger bit. Here it says here, if you can see it here, it's a bit small. Gilbertus hoc fecit. Gilbertus made this. So lots of arguments about, was it the guy that gave the money that made the church that made this, or was it the artist? People tend to say the guy's name was Gilbertus. He did all of the iconographic program himself. Nobody else helped him. Well, he had a couple of assistants. You could see a couple where the assistants helped out, but he designed everything. It's all not like at Berze-la-Ville, where you can see various hands have been at work. Here, for example, is the angel waking up the three kings and saying, oh, you better get going, because there's the star above, and Herod, told you to go off. He's tapping this king on his hand. His eyes are open. He's woken up. The other two are still snoozing. and you'll see that the eyes are drilled and then they filled with blue paste. This is still the original paste in there, which is pretty fantastic. I think it's just a beautiful picture. I guess we're getting quite close. Here you got one. So you'll see the repetition here, and now you start seeing the difference. So this is again Judas. He's hung himself from a tree. In this case, the devils are pulling on ropes. Here's the bag with the 30 pieces of silver in it. So you see it's very differently portrayed from the other. In fact, you're going to get, here's the death of Cain. We didn't do it in the other one. It was portrayed there as well, actually twice in Berze-la-Ville.
So
what happens here?
There's competition going on, in a sense, when these churches become finished and the teams move on to the next church to work. They've seen these local churches, right? And then in this case, you've got this wonderful, sensitive artist whose style goes through the whole church, but he's definitely like knowing what's going on in the churches nearby. So there's this self-consciousness about what will my church look like, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is he was from there. So if you want to, I can do more of these. And because there's the master of Avenas who did Cluny and did Avenas and did ANCY-LE-DUC, and he was a local guy. Likewise, this guy, Gilbertus, is a local guy. And they very much had local people that learned locally how to do this. And they used the examples of the books and as I said, the carpets and the Roman, there's Roman stuff scattered everywhere, so they could look at that. It was different down in Toulouse, which was in the Aquitaine area. Here we're in Burgundy, and it's a completely different area, and they use local sculptors. I think the architects were more international because you didn't want the building to fall over. And so there's very much, as Alex says, a homegrown style, but it also refers to others. And seeing they were all part of this whole Cluniac area, some of them were moved around.
Absolutely.
So as I said, Gilbertus went to Berze-la-Ville.
And they were competing with each other. There was already an expectation, right? That is the kind of fun we want to have in our church. And show us like 2 more capitals here from Autun.
Okay, well, so this one here is they do a lot of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel is a big story, and they have various parts of their life, and there's some wonderful stuff. So here, Cain, who was marked by God because he had killed Abel, is being shot by his brother Lamech. He's blind, and his grandson, his name's something like Tulabane, is holding his arm and pointing to what he thinks is a deer, and he's shooting with his arrow, and he's already got one. Here you can see he's already got a thing in his neck, an arrow sticking into his neck there. And
he's lifted up by being hit by the arrow. Holy
yeah, God. It's spectacular.
Speaking
and here, so I like this one. So anyone who's got a teenage son, so this is God saying to Cain, "Hey, what's happened to Abel?" And Cain says, "I don't know." He literally said, "I don't know." And round the corner, there's the body of Abel, lying in the bushes. So the body is naked. Nakedness generally represents death. Again, look at the foliage. I mean, it's just spectacular. But you look at this, look at him, you can see their eyes and everything. This is such a teenage stance, just saying, "Oh, I don't know." It's spectacular. There's a beautiful another Eve one here. I'd love to find. They just, I mean, there's so here you've got here the 3 Marys. Mary, Magdalene, and the others. They're going to the tomb. So here we see them starting off. They're coming out here, and they're talking to themselves just outside the tomb. That's on the left. So you have to read these things in different orders sometimes. Here they're going around into the tomb, and there they see the angel. I'm sorry about the quality, but these things are very dark in there and they're very high and angles, and I'm squeezed up, so I couldn't always take good pictures. But so here you see the angel saying, there's nobody here, and he's showing in the hole here that it's empty, right? And then here Mary meets Jesus, and he says, "Noli me tangere," you know, don't touch me. And she's holding, you know, it's Mary because A, she doesn't have her hair's Mary Magdalene because her hair is not properly covered, and B, she's got her incense in her hand. And that's another conflation, because that was another woman that came in and put the if you remember, the scent on Jesus's head, and the apostles reprimanded her, and she said you shouldn't. And that wasn't Mary Magdalene either, but she's just like this grab bag of everything. She's, you know, represents lust, and she represents all these different things. And so, Iris, if you want to get upset with somebody, you should get upset with the portrayal of that part of her, because people really put all their thoughts into her.
Tom, the three ladies at the tomb were supposed to anoint the body. So they also came with anointing oil, and they were supposed to touch the body. And then suddenly there's this ghosty figure that says, "Don't touch me." And so there's all this business there in that capital about oil and touching. And they get it, they do it with this economy of means that is really stunning.
Yeah, so you're right, but I think the actual meeting of Noli me tangere was later. So anyway, so here, this is the conversion of St. Paul. You can see it's St. Paul again because he's bald. So different artists, same convention. Here, so here he's getting baptized, and here he's getting blessed by God and whatever else here. What I like about this is the symbolism of the way that they say he's being baptized, which is superbly done, I think, as well. And again, you can see his hairstyle there, which is useful. All right, well, it goes on and on. I mean, here's St. Peter stuck in the, you can see he's chained around his neck there, you know, St. Peter, because the angel's holding the key.
Letting him out of the prison, the dream, he comes to him and lets him out of the prison. Absolutely.
Right.
Tom, are you going to continue this for the rest of them while I'm on vacation?
If you like. Do people want that?
I think what we should do is have people, I'm going to send them your email address. And Tom also has Zoom. And I would really think you all would have such a lovely chance to continue this, because there's nobody who has better pictures of this. I've never seen better pictures, even in college, when we did this for a term. There was nothing like this in terms of the encyclopedicness of the pictures. It's absolutely stunning, actually. And I think it's a great opportunity, actually, to be able to indulge in this. So he offered a little bit to me. He said, if people are interested, we could do a couple of more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send around to everybody his email address. And if you're interested in the next 1 or 2 or whatever lectures for the summer, since we're not having class, you could have a few of these. And I would suggest you send your email at Tom, and he will send you an invite, the way I send a Zoom invite, for a part 2. And then if the part 2 needs to be a part 3, you can decide. Does that sound fair, Tom?
Yeah, well, a couple of things to that. So it doesn't have to be once a week. We're also disappearing late June. So I'm happy to do them, you know, we could do one every 2 days. So what I could do is write to everyone and say, okay, do you want it? Do you want 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more? And do you want to have it on this day or that day? And is this time okay? And then I'll try and find something that works for everyone.
Yeah. Does that sound good, folks? I mean, this is an incredible opportunity. Yeah. And I'm going to check in from Patmos. So I'll be along, and I would love to be sitting on my island and sitting there and listening to this too. Because honestly, When I walked around these churches, you don't usually see the detail in this detail, and you're confused half the time by these stories. I mean, he's also done all the background work on really what story is being represented. And isn't it a wonderful storytelling that's going on here? It's really the beginning of a very sophisticated Christian iconography that we are inheritors to for the rest of the Renaissance, for the rest of the Baroque. And, you know, it's a marvelous thing. So I think if he's willing to give us some more of his time, I think it's a smart thing if we take it. Can we take it, Tom? Can we?
Absolutely. I mean, you look
more of your time. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the email he prepared and his email address, and then respond back to Tom because he's going to send out the invites. Okie dokie. Is that good?
Yeah, and let me know straight away. Let me know straight away when you want it. If you want, you know, what frequency, how many more you'd like. I can do longer. I can do the same amount of time.
I'm going to stop the recording right now too. I'm just going to stop the recording and say thank you. I'm stopping the recording just now. Oh my goodness. Yes.